And we continue with The Night Before Christmas by Nikolai Gogol. At first, Vakula found it frightening when he rose to such a height that he could see nothing below and flew like a fly right under the moon, so that if he hadn't ducked slightly, he would have brushed it with his hat. However, in a short while, he took heart and began making fun of the devil. He was extremely amused by the way the devil sneezed and coughed whenever he took his cypress wood cross from his neck and put it near him. He would purposely raise his hand to scratch his head, and the devil, thinking he was about to cross him, would speed up his flight. Everything was bright aloft. The air was transparent, all in a light silvery mist. Everything was visible, and he could even observe how a sorcerer, sitting in a pot, raced past them like the wind, how the stars gathered together to play blind man's bluff, how a whole swarm of phantoms billowed in a cloud off to one side, how a devil dancing around the moon took his hat off on seeing the mounted blacksmith, how a broom came flying hack, having just served some witch. They met a lot more trash. Seeing the blacksmith, all stopped for a moment to look at him and then rushed on their way again. The blacksmith flew on, and suddenly Petersburg, all ablaze, glittered before him. It was lit up for some occasion. The devil, flying over the toll gate, turned into a horse, and the blacksmith saw himself on a swift racer in the middle of the street. My God! The clatter, the thunder, the glitter, four-story walls loomed on both sides. The clatter of horses' hooves and the rumble of wheels sounded like thunder and echoed on four sides. Horses grew as if rising from the ground at every step. Bridges trembled, carriages flew by, cabbies and postilions shouted. Snow swished under 1,000 sleds, flying on all sides. Passers-by pressed against and huddled under houses studded with lamps, and their huge shadows flitted over the walls, their heads reaching the chimneys and roofs. The blacksmith looked about him in amazement. It seemed to him that the houses all turned their countless fiery eyes on him and stared. He saw so many gentlemen in fur-lined coats that he didn't know before whom to doff his hat. My God, so much nobility here, thought the blacksmith. I think each one going down the street in a fur coat is another assessor, and the ones driving around in those wonderful britskas with windows. If they're not police chiefs, then they're surely commissars, or maybe even higher up. His words were interrupted by a question from the devil. Shall we go straight to the Tsaritsa? No, it's scary, thought the blacksmith. Those Zaporotsky who passed through the Kana in the fall are staying here somewhere. They were coming from the Sech with papers for the Tsaritsa. I'd better talk it over with them. Hey, little Satan, get in my pocket and lead me to the Zaporotsky. The devil instantly shrank and became so small that he easily got into Vakula's pocket, and before Vakula had time to look around, he found himself in front of a big house, went up the stairs himself, not knowing how, opened a door, and drew back slightly from the splendor on seeing the furnished room. Then he took heart somewhat, recognizing the same Cossacks who had passed through Takanka, sitting cross-legged on silk divans in their tarred boots and smoking the strongest tobacco, the kind known as rootstock. Good day, gentlemen. God be with you. So this is where we meet again, said the blacksmith, going closer and bowing to the ground. Who's that man there? Said the one sitting right in front of the blacksmith. The one sitting right in front of the blacksmith asked another sitting further away. You don't recognize me, said the blacksmith. It's me, Vakula, the blacksmith. When you passed through the Kanka in the fall, you stayed, God grant you all health and long life, for nearly 2 days, and I put a new tire on the front wheel of your kibitka then. Ah, said the first Cossack. This is the same blacksmith who paints so well. Greetings, landsman. What brings you here? Oh, I just came for a look around, they say. Well, landsman, the Cossack said, assuming a dignified air and wishing to show that he, too, could speak Russian. It's a big city, eh? The blacksmith did not want to disgrace himself and look like a greenhorn. What's more, as we had occasion to see earlier, he too was acquainted with literate language. A grand province, he replied with equanimity. No disputing it. The houses are plenty big. There's good paintings hanging everywhere. A lot of houses have an extremity of letters in gold leaf written on them. Wonderful proportions. There's no disputing it. Zafarosty, hearing the blacksmith express himself so fluently, drew very favorable conclusions about him. We'll talk more with you later, landsman. Right now we're on our way to the Tsarista. The Tsarista? Be so kind, masters, as to take me with you. You? The Cossack said, with the air of a tutor talking to his 4-year-old charge who was begging to be put on a real big horse. What will you do there? No, impossible. With that, his face assumed an imposing mien. We, brother, are going to discuss our own affairs with the Tsarista. Take me, the blacksmith persisted. Big them, he whispered softly to the devil, hitting the pocket with his fist. Before he got the words out, another Cossack spoke up. Let's take him, brothers. All right, let's take him, said the others. Get dressed the same as we are. The blacksmith was just pulling on a green jacket when the door suddenly opened, and a man with a gold braid came in and said it was time to go. Again, it seemed a marvel to the blacksmith as he raced along in the huge carriage, rocking on its springs, when 4-storied houses raced backward past him on both sides, and the street, rumbling, seemed to roll under the horses' hooves. My God, what light! The blacksmith thought to himself. Back home it's not so bright at noontime. The carriages stopped in front of the palace. The Cossacks got out, went into the magnificent front hall, and stared up the brilliantly lit stairway. What a stairway! The blacksmith whispered to himself. It's a pity to trample it underfoot, such ornaments. See, and they say it's all tall tales. The devil, it's tall tales. My God, what a banister, such workmanship. It's 50 rubles worth of iron alone. After climbing the stairs, the Cossacks passed through the first hall. The blacksmith followed them timidly, afraid of slipping on the parquet floor at every step. They passed through 3 halls, and the blacksmith still couldn't stop being amazed. On entering the 4th, he inadvertently went up to a painting that hung on the wall. It was the most pure virgin with the child in her arms. What a painting! What wonderful art! He thought. It seems to be speaking. It seems alive. And the holy child, he clasps his little hands and smiles, poor thing. And the colors, oh my God, what colors! I bet there's not a kopek's worth of ochre. It's all verdigris and crimson. And the blue is so bright, great workmanship. And the ground must have been done in white lead. But astonishing as the painting is, this brass handle, he went on, going up to the door and feeling the latch, is worthy of still greater astonishment. What perfect finish! I bet German blacksmiths made it all, and for a very dear price. The blacksmith would probably have gone on reasoning for a long time if a lackey with galloons hadn't nudged his arm, reminding him not to lag around. The Cossacks passed through 2 more halls and stopped. Here they were told to wait. In the hall was a group of generals in gold-embroidered uniforms. The Cossacks bowed on all sides and stood in a cluster. A minute later, a rather stout man of majestic height, wearing a hetman's uniform and yellow boots, came in, accompanied by a whole retinue. His hair was disheveled, one eye was slightly askew, his face showed a certain haughty grandeur. All his movements betrayed a habit of command. The generals, who had been pacing up and down quite arrogantly in their golden uniforms, began bustling about and bowing low, and seemed to hang on his every word and even his slightest gesture, so as to rush at once and fulfill it. But the hetman did not pay any attention, barely nodded his head, and went up to the Cossacks. The Cossacks all gave a low bow. "Are you all here?" he asked with a drawl, pronouncing the words slightly through his nose. "All here, father," the Cossacks replied, bowing again. "You won't forget to speak the way I taught you?" "No, father, we won't forget." "Is that the Tsar?" asked the blacksmith. The blacksmith asked one of the Cossacks. "Tsar nothing, it's Potemkin himself," the man replied. Voices came from the other room, and the blacksmith did not know where to look from the multitude of ladies entering in satin dresses with long trains, and the courtiers in gold-embroidered caftans with queues behind. He saw only splendor and nothing more. Suddenly the Cossacks all fell to the ground and cried out in one voice, "Have mercy, mother! Have mercy!" The blacksmith, seeing nothing, also zealously prostrated himself on the ground. "Get up!" a voice imperious and at the same "Get up!" a voice imperious and at the same time pleasant sounded above them. Some of the courtiers bustled about and nudged the Cossacks. "We won't get up, mother, we won't! We'd rather die than get up!" the Cossacks cried. Potemkin was biting his lips. Finally he went over himself and whispered commandingly to one of the Cossacks. They got up. Here the blacksmith also ventured to raise his head, and saw standing before him a woman of small stature, even somewhat portly, powdered, with blue eyes, and with that majestically smiling air which knew so well how to make all obey, and could belong only to a woman who reigns. "His Highness promised to acquaint me today with one of my peoples whom I have not yet seen," the lady with the blue eyes said as she studied the Cossacks with curiosity. "Are you being kept well here?" she continued, coming nearer. "Thank you, mother. The victuals are good, though the lamb hereabouts is not at all like in our Zaporozhye. But why not take what comes?" Potemkin winced, seeing that the Cossacks were saying something completely different from what he had taught them. One of the Cossacks, assuming an air of dignity, stepped forward. "Have mercy, mother! Why would you ruin loyal people? How have we angered you? Have we joined hands with the foul Tartar? Have we made any agreement with the Turk? Have we betrayed you in deed or in thought? Why then the disgrace? First, we heard you had ordered fortresses built everywhere for protection against us. Then we heard that you wanted to turn us into carabinieri. Now we hear of new calamities. What is it? The Zaporozhye army. In what is the Zaporozhye army at fault? That it brought your troops across the Perekop and helped your generals to cut down the Crimeans." Potemkin kept silent, with a small brush casually cleaned the diamonds that studded his hands. "What then do you want?" Catherine asked solicitously. The Cossacks looked meaningfully at one another. "Now's the time. The Tsaritsa is asking what we want," the blacksmith said to himself, and suddenly fell to the ground. "Your Imperial Majesty, punish me not, but grant me mercy, meaning no offense, your Imperial Grace, but what are the booties you're wearing made of? I bet not one cobbler in my country of the world can make them like that. My God, if only my wife could wear such booties." The Empress laughed. The courtiers also laughed. Potemkin frowned and smiled at the same time. The Cossacks began nudging the blacksmith's arm, thinking he had lost his mind. "Get up," the Empress said benignly. "If you want so much to have such shoes, it's not hard to do. Bring him my most expensive shoes at once, the ones with the gold. Truly, this simple-heartedness pleases me very much. Here," the Empress went on, directing her eyes at a middle-aged man with a plump but somewhat pale face, who was standing further off than the others, and whose modest caftan with big mother-of-pearl buttons showed that he did not belong to the number of the courtiers. "You have a subject worthy of your witty pen. You are too gracious, your Imperial Majesty. Here, at least, a La Fontaine is called for," the man with the mother-of-pearl buttons replied, bowing. "I tell you, in honesty, I love your Brigadier to distraction. I've read it you read remarkably well. However," the Empress went on, turning to the Cossacks, "I've heard that in the Setch you never marry." "How so, mother?" "You know yourself a man can't live without a wife," replied the same Cossack who had spoken with the blacksmith, and the blacksmith was surprised to hear this Cossack, who had such a good knowledge of literate language, talk with the Tsaritsa, as if on purpose, in the coarsest way, usually called Muzhik speech. "Clever folk," he thought to himself. "He's surely doing it for a reason." We are not monks, the Cossack went on, but sinful people. We fall for non-Lenten things, as all honest Christendom does. Not a few among us have wives, though they don't live with them in the Sech. There are some who have wives in Poland. There are some who have wives in the Ukraine. There are even some who have wives in Turkey. Just then the shoes were brought to the blacksmith. My God, what an adornment, he cried joyfully, seizing the shoes. Your Imperial Majesty, if the shoes on your feet are like this, and your honor probably even wears them to go ice skating, then how must the feet themselves be? I bet of pure sugar at least. The Empress, who did in fact have very shapely and lovely feet, could not help smiling at hearing such a compliment from the lips of a simple-hearted blacksmith who, in his Zaporozhye outfit, could be considered a handsome fellow despite his swarthy complexion. Gladdened by such favorable attention, the blacksmith was just going to question the Tsaritsa properly about everything. Was it true that Tsars only eat honey and lard? And so on, but, feeling the Cossacks nudging him in the ribs, he decided to keep quiet. And when the Empress, turning to the elders, began asking how they lived in the Sech and what their customs were, he stepped back, bent to his pocket, and said softly, "Get me out of here quick," and suddenly found himself beyond the toll gate. He drowned! By God, he drowned! May I never leave this spot if he didn't drown, the weaver's fat wife babbled, standing in the middle of the street amidst a crowd of Takanka women. What am I, some kind of liar? Did I steal anybody's cow? Did I put a spell on anybody that you don't believe me? Shouted a woman in a Cossack blouse with a violet nose, waving her arms. May I never drink water again. If old Peperchinka didn't see the blacksmith hang himself with her own eyes. The blacksmith hanged himself. Just look at that, said the headman, coming out of Chaub's house, and he stopped and pushed closer to the talking women. Why not tell us you'll never drink vodka again, you old drunkard, replied the weaver's wife. A man would have to be crazy as you are to hang himself. He drowned in a hole in the ice. I know it as well as I know you just left the tavern. The hussy, see what she reproaches me with, the woman with the violet nose retorted angrily. You'd better shut up, you jade. Don't I know that the deacon comes calling on you every evening? The weaver's wife flared up. The deacon what? Calls on whom? How you lie. The deacon? Sang out the deacon's wife in a rabbit-skin coat covered with blue nankeen, pushing her way toward the quarreling women. I'll show you a deacon. Who said deacon? It's her deacon comes calling on, said the woman with the violet nose, pointing to the weaver's wife. So it's you bitch, said the deacon's wife, accosting the weaver's wife. So it's you hellcat, who blow fog in his eyes and give him unclean portions to drink, so as to make him come to you. Leave me alone, you she-devil, the weaver's wife said, backing away. You cursed hellcat! May you never live to see your children. And the deacon's wife spat straight into the weaver's wife's eyes. The weaver's wife wanted to respond in kind, but instead spat into the unshaven chin of the headman, who, in order to hear better, had edged right up to the quarreling women. Ugh, nasty women, cried the headman, wiping his face with the skirt of his coat and raising his whip. That gesture caused everyone to disband, cursing in all directions. What vileness, he repeated, still wiping himself. So the blacksmith is drowned, my God, and what a good painter he was. What strong knives, sickles, and plows he could forge. Such strength he had. Yes, he went on pondering. There are few such people in our village. That's why I noticed while I was still sitting in that cursed sack that the poor fellow was really in bad spirits. That's it for your blacksmith. He was, and now he's not. And I was just going to have my piebald mare shod. And filled with such Christian thoughts, the headman slowly trudged home. Oksana was confused when the news reached her. She trusted little in Peperchinka's eyes, or in women's talk. She knew that the blacksmith was too pious to dare destroy his soul, but what if he had left with the intention of never coming back to the village? There was hardly such a fine fellow as the blacksmith anywhere else, and he loved her so. He had put up with her caprices longest. All night under her blanket the beauty tossed from right to left, from left to right, and couldn't fall asleep. Now sprawled in an enchanted nakedness, which the dark of night concealed even from herself, she scolded herself almost aloud. Then, calming down, she resolved not to think about anything, and went on thinking. And she was burning all over, and by morning she was head over heels in love with the blacksmith. Chaub expressed neither joy nor grief at Vakula's lot. His thoughts were occupied with one thing. He was simply unable to forget Solaka's perfidy, and, even in his sleep, never stopped abusing her. Morning came. Even before dawn, the whole church was filled with people. Elderly women in white headscarves and white flannel blouses piously crossed themselves just at the entrance to the church. Ladies in green and yellow vests, and some even in dark blue jackets with gold curlicues behind, stood in front of them. Young girls with a whole mercer's shop of ribbons wound round their heads, and with beads, crosses, and coin necklaces on their necks, tried to make their way still closer to the iconostasis. But in front of them all stood the squires and simple muzhiks, with mustaches, top knots, thick necks, and freshly shaven chins, almost all of them in hooded flannel cloaks, from under which peeked here a white and there a blue blouse. All the faces, wherever you looked, had a festive air. The head man licked his chops, imagining himself breaking his fast with sausage. The young girls' thoughts were of going ice skating with their lads. The old women whispered their prayers more zealously than ever. You could hear the Cossack Severbaigas bowing all over the church. Only Oksana stood as if not herself. She prayed and did not pray. There were so many different feelings crowding in her heart, one more vexing than another, one more rueful than another, that her face expressed nothing but great confusion. Tears quivered in her eyes. The girls couldn't understand the reason for it, and didn't suspect that the blacksmith was to blame. However, Oksana was not the only one concerned about the blacksmith. The parishioners all noticed that it was as if the feast was not a feast, as if something was lacking. As luck would have it, the deacon, after his journey in the sack, had grown hoarse, and croaked in a barely audible voice. True, the visiting singer hit the bass notes nicely, but it would have been much better if the blacksmith had been there, who, whenever the Our Father or the cherubic hymn was sung, always went up to the choir and sang out from there in the same way they sing in Poltava. Besides, he was the one who did the duties of the church warden. Matins were already over. After matins, the liturgy, where indeed had the blacksmith disappeared to? Still more swiftly, in the remaining time of night, did the devil race home with the blacksmith. Vakula instantly found himself by his cottage. Just then the cock crowed. "Hold on!" he cried, snatching the devil by the tail as he was about to run away. "Wait, friend, that's not all. I haven't thanked you yet." Here, seizing a switch, he measured him out 3 strokes, and the poor devil broke into a run, like a muzhik who has just been given a roasting by an assessor. And so, instead of deceiving, seducing, and duping others, the enemy of the human race was duped himself. After which, Vakula went into the front hall, burrowed under the hay, and slept until dinner time. Waking up, he was frightened when he saw the sun already high. "I slept through matins and the liturgy." And the pious blacksmith sank into dejection, reasoning that God, as a punishment for his sinful intention of destroying his soul, must have sent him a sleep that kept him from going to church on such a solemn feast day. However, having calmed himself by deciding to confess it to the priest the next week, and to start the same day making 50 bows a day for the whole year, he peeked into the cottage, but no one was home. Solaka must not have come back yet. He carefully took the shoes from his bosom, and again marveled at the costly workmanship and the strange adventure of the past night. He washed, dressed, the best he could, putting on the clothes he got from the Cossacks, took from his trunk a new hat of Reshetalovo Astrakhan with a blue top, which he had not worn even once since he bought it while he was in Poltava. He also took out a new belt of all colors. He put it into a handkerchief along with a whip and went straight to Chaub. Chaub goggled his eyes when the blacksmith came in and didn't know which to marvel at, that the blacksmith had resurrected, or that the blacksmith had dared to come to him, or that he got himself up so foppishly as a Zaporizhzhia Cossack. But he was still more amazed when Vakula untied the handkerchief and placed before him a brand new hat and a belt such as he had never seen in the village, and himself fell at his feet and said in a pleading voice, "Have mercy, father. Don't be angry. Here's a whip for you. Beat me as much as your soul desires. I give myself up. I repent of everything. Beat me, only don't be angry. You were once bosom friends with my late father. You ate bread and salt together and drank each other's health." Chaub, not without secret pleasure, beheld the blacksmith, who did not care a hoot about anyone in the village, who bent copper coins and horseshoes in his bare hands like buckwheat pancakes, the same blacksmith lying at his feet. So as not to demean himself, Chaub took the whip and struck him 3 times on the back. "Well, that's enough for you. Get up. Always listen to your elders. Let's forget whatever was between us. So, tell me now, what do you want?" "Give me Oksana for my wife, father." Chaub thought a little, looked at the hat and belt. It was a wonderful hat, and the belt was no worse. He remembered the perfidious Solaka and said resolutely, "Righto, send the matchmakers." "Aye!" Oksana cried out, stepping across the threshold and seeing the blacksmith, and with amazement and joy she fastened her eyes on him. "Look what booties I brought you," said Vakula, "the very ones the Tsaritsa wears." No, I don't need any booties," she said, waving her hands and not taking her eyes off him. "Even without the booties, She blushed and did not say any more. The blacksmith went up to her and took her hand. The beauty looked down. Never yet had she been so wondrously pretty. The delighted blacksmith gently kissed her. Her face flushed still more, and she became even prettier. A bishop of blessed memory was driving through Dikanka, praised the location of the village, and, driving down the street, stopped in front of a new cottage. "To whom does this painted cottage belong?" his reverence asked of the beautiful woman with a baby in her arms who was standing by the door. "To the blacksmith Vakula," said Oksana, bowing to him, for it was precisely she. Fine work," said his reverence, studying the doors and windows. The windows were all outlined in red, and on the doors everywhere were mounted Cossacks with pipes in their teeth. But his reverence praised Vakula still more when he learned that he had undergone a church penance and had painted the entire left-hand choir green with red flowers free of charge. That, however, was not all. On the wall to the right, as you entered the church, Vakula had painted a devil in hell, such a nasty one that everybody spat as they went by, and the women, if a child started crying in their arms, would carry it over to the picture and say, "See what a cock has painted there," and the child, holding back its tears, would look askance at the picture and press against its mother's breast. And that is the end of The Night Before Christmas.